Hello and welcome to the Owl's Nest, and welcome to week 2 of the Overwatch League. I thought the first weekend was overall really exciting, a lot of great matches, and something kind of nice, a very fluid meta. We saw a lot of different hero comps, some similarity amongst them, but overall I thought it was a really successful first weekend. With the elephant in the room being the production mistakes, though I do want you guys to keep in mind that they are doing a homestand format now, which is pretty new for something like this, so there's probably going to be a few production hiccups at the start of the league, but even day 2 was better than day 1 for that, so I don't think those will be a huge issue. So anyway, in this video we are going to break down the matches from week 1 and go over what you guys thought the results would be, and then after that we are going to go and preview what matchups are coming this weekend. So let's just dive right into it and start with Toronto versus Paris. This was the first matchup and probably the one that suffered the most from production issues, which is a bit of a shame, but anyway, just going into the matchup itself, I thought Toronto started pretty shaky as they dropped Mac 1, and I thought there was some hope for Paris. In terms of Toronto, I'm still not 100% convinced about this lineup, which, if anything, I think I might go back on my expectations for them, even though they won the matchup. I'm still not 100% convinced by Beast and Nevix. They looked pretty off and on throughout the match, and I think until Surefour came in, the team lacked leadership. Also, I thought Kariv's play was a little up and down. It seemed like he never really had a successful nano. Like anytime he'd nano Surefour, it just didn't seem to work out. So I think there's still some teething pains with this new Toronto lineup, but I think Paris brought a lot to the table. I mean, for starters, Xe looked great and a potential Rookie of the Year candidate. Though it's only week 1, he still looked really strong. And I think Smex being ill, their off tank, and being forced to run Bed and Best and No Smite as your 2 tank options, that limits your team comp a little bit, but still I was impressed with what I saw from Paris. So I was correct about it being a 3-1 win for Toronto. That was my prediction, but the match was a lot closer than I thought it would be. Paris looked strong. Anyway, as for you guys, the fan response was 86% for Toronto, so not a whole lot of you guys went for Paris. I don't think a whole lot of people did, but I definitely think Paris looked pretty good. Next up, we have the New York versus London matchup, and I thought London looked better than expected as well, similar to Paris. I think if we look at how they took the first map off of the NYXL, it stunned the crowd at the homestand. And I still think they have some stuff to work out. I thought Glister and Babel looked really good together on DPS. However, JMac, their main tank, hasn't really sold me, so we'll have to see a little bit more from him until I have a real definitive opinion. As for New York though, I thought they looked really good. Hotbo looks like he might have been an upgraded off tank from Mecha, which is really good news for NYXL fans. And Who Are You looks like he fits right into this lineup. It was so exciting to see him pull out the Genji, and I think Nixel might be as good as we thought they were. Anyway, my prediction was a 3-0 win, which was incorrect. It was a 3-1 win. As for you guys, 96% of you had New York winning this matchup. So yeah, we were pretty right, but I think London still looked better than we thought they would. So now let's go ahead and switch it over to the Dallas homestand, where we started with the Los Angeles Gladiators versus the Vancouver Titans. And I thought this was one of the best matches of the weekend, and probably one of the closest ones. Going into it, we didn't know how good Vancouver was going to look or how good the Gladiators were going to look. And I think one of the big surprises was the Gladiators rolled out with, on 4 of the 5 maps, LH Cloudy at main tank, which I think most people were expecting to see OG. So when he came in, I think Gladiators fans and League fans were just kind of thrown off. But they looked good under him, and they won a few maps. As for Vancouver, I thought they looked really promising. Fissure did not seem to be a hindrance to the team, and other than a few synergy issues, I think he'll be pretty good for the team overall as they get used to him. And I thought Jaehong on Hanamura looked really good as well. It was just kind of nice to see Fissure, Jaehong, and Hoxel all on the same map. It was just kind of nice. Anyway, my prediction for this match was it going 3-0 to Vancouver, but the Gladiators made it a lot closer of a game as it obviously finished 3-2 Vancouver. And as for the fan vote, you guys had Vancouver, but only 60% of you guys did, so you guys thought this matchup was super close as well. As for the other matchup of the Los Angeles Valiant and the Dallas Fuel, I think the Valiant looked pretty promising. There were a lot of doom and gloom, me included, amongst the Valiant roster for next year, a lot of them having him at 19th in the power rankings, but the players they have looked really strong, and it might have been because they were playing Dallas, but KSP looked great on the McCree, KSF looked great on May, McGravy's Diva was insane this game, and I just don't think Dallas really had an answer for it, and I think the Valiant are looking like they're better than they were rated, which is nice to see. As for Dallas, I think their DPS looks really good. I think Decay and Doha look like promising additions, however their tanks aren't really great. I didn't think Trill or Note was that impressive on the off tank, and I thought Gamsu looked okay. It was a losing effort by the Fuel, so it's a little hard to judge Gamsu, but still, I wasn't very impressed. And my prediction for this matchup was 3-1 going to Dallas, but it ended up being 3-1 going to the Valiant. So, overall, I think a disappointing match for Fuel fans, but a good one for Valiant fans. And as for the fan prediction, you guys had Dallas 2/3, so 20 of the 30 responses were for Dallas, whereas the other 10 were for the Valiant. So a little close, but not quite as close as that last matchup. But yeah, overall, kind of an upset, and the Valiant looked really strong. Now if we switch over to day 2, let's start with Paris versus London, and I thought Paris looked really dominant here, and it might be because they aren't playing Toronto, so maybe we're seeing a Toronto team that's much better than London, but I thought XE once again looked super clutch, and it didn't seem like London had much of an answer to the Symmetra strats that Paris was pulling out, whereas London kind of looked shaky, and any cohesion they had from the NYXL map that they won looked pretty much gone. I thought this game was going to be a lot closer, and I had Paris winning it 3-2, but it ended up being a blowout by Paris, and they won 3-0. And as for the fans, you guys actually had London winning 83%. So you guys went against me on this one, and it looks like I was right. Sorry, guys. But yeah, overall, kind of an upset. And one of my big takeaways is Paris looks a lot better than we thought they would this weekend. And with some of their contender signings turning 18 soon, Sparkle still has a while, but the rest of them should be good to go. I'm a little scared about this Paris lineup. They could be pretty intense. Next up is Boston versus New York, and unfortunately I don't have much to say here because it went about as we thought it would. Boston just does not look good, and I'm genuinely concerned about their team. And New York, I have the same praises that I had for them against the London Spitfire. They just look great, and Jonak clowning Color Hex on Anubis was hilarious, and I think New York is definitely a title contender. As for my prediction, I had New York winning it 3-0, and that did end up being correct. And you guys had 90% of the votes going to New York, so that didn't change either. Next up for day 2 of Dallas matches, we had the Valiant versus Vancouver, and I think the Valiant got humbled a little bit here. I don't know if they expected to beat Dallas, but when they did, they looked dominant, whereas Vancouver, they got pretty much pushed over. I thought Gig looked a little bit too aggro. Yeah, I just wasn't sold on his main tank play, and I think the Valiant still have potential. Vancouver's a great team, but yeah, this was just mostly the Titans looking really dominant, and my prediction was them winning 3-0, and they did win 3-0. And the fans, actually all 30 of you guys, had Vancouver winning at 100%. That was the only consensus amongst the weekend. So yeah, it was a dominant showing from Vancouver, and I think any doubters they had are probably gone now. I don't know, there's still some concern later in the season for them if Fisher flames out, but he's looked good so far. And our last matchup of the weekend is going to be the San Francisco Shock going up against the Dallas Fuel, and this map went about as I expected, and I thought that the Shock looked really dominant still. Striker, when he clutched out Oasis, looked great, and even though they dropped Horizon, I think that was just them kind of getting readjusted to the Overwatch League stage, especially if they're playing against the hometown team Dallas here. Whereas Dallas, I still have the same worries that I had with them against the Valiant, and it was a very Dallas way for the weekend to go, losing 3-0 to the Valiant, but 3-1 to the Shock. I'm still worried about Dallas this season, and if anything, this weekend kind of confirmed all the worries I had. My prediction was this to go 3-1 to the Shock, which it did, and you guys had 96% of you going for the Shock, so there's probably one Fuel fan out there who's a little disappointed, but yeah, this was pretty expected. Still though, I think the Shock looked great. And now what you guys are all here for, let's go ahead and look at this weekend, and the homestand is going to be in Philadelphia. And there was a second homestand planned for this weekend in Shanghai, but that was obviously canceled due to the coronavirus outbreak, so the Philadelphia homestand is all we got this weekend. So starting with Saturday, the first matchup is going to be the Florida Mayhem versus the Houston Outlaws. And I think the big question for Florida is going to be, how will the changes affect the new team? If you look at the core that they're kind of bringing in from Runaway and some of their other signings, compared to how they finished with kind of a ray of sunshine in Stage 4, I'm interested to see how this Florida team comes out after a long offseason and after 2 seasons of disappointment. I think seeing how they match up against the Outlaws will be a good test for them. I think these two teams are pretty evenly matched too. Next up is going to be the Houston Outlaws against them, and I think the big question for them is also how will their new players fit in. Meko, Rappel, and Jexay I all expect to see signing. Meko, Rappel, and Jexay I all expect to be playing in the first matchup, and I'm interested to see how they'll do. So my prediction for this matchup is going to be Houston winning it 3-1. I think Florida still has a little bit more to work out, and I think Houston just has probably a little bit more synergy. But I'm going to open this up to you guys, so go ahead and click the link in the description for the form to make your prediction. Alright, next up is going to be the Washington Justice versus the Philadelphia Fusion. So my big question for the Justice is going to be, are they as good as they finished last year? They had a fantastic Stage 4, but I think there's still a few question marks. First of all, Elevote won't be at the homestand event, so they have to start Roar and Lulshish, and I'm not sure how that group is going to do. It's kind of hard to think of Lulshish without thinking of Elevote, so I'm curious how this new lineup works. And I think the big question for the Philadelphia Fusion is going to be, are you guys a super team? I think some of the highly anticipated new additions of Funny Astro, Alarm, and Fury are probably going to take the stage, and I'm interested to see how they do against this Justice team. Anyway, my prediction for the matchup is going to be Philadelphia winning it 3-0. I think that Philly just has a lot more superstar players than Washington does, and though I think Corey finished really strong, I'm not sold on the team. But anyway, I'm going to open up to you guys. Go ahead and click and make your prediction for the teams in the link below. Anyway, moving on to Sunday's matchups, we have the Washington Justice versus the Houston Outlaws, and I think Washington needs to really set the tone for their season in this matchup. It's kind of hard to really predict other things about these teams because we don't know how the first day of matches is going to go, but I think for Washington it's especially important because if you start your season 2-0 or 1-1, that's pretty promising for fans. But considering how they did last year, if you start 0-2, that could be really concerning, and maybe a suggestion that you gotta blow the roster up again, which would be a bummer. As for Houston, I think you need to just kind of check, are the doubters right? Similar to Washington, they just really need to get started on the right path, and I think this weekend is how you obviously do that. As for my prediction for this matchup, I have Houston winning it 3-2, but I think it's going to be close. I think all of these teams except for Philly are pretty evenly matched, so I'm excited to see how they match up against each other. Now I'm going to open up to you guys. Do you think Washington has this, or do you think Houston has this? And finally, our last matchup is going to be the Florida Mayhem versus the Philly Fusion. And I think Florida, their goal here should be, how can we surprise the league? I would suggest for Florida, look a little bit more like Paris and less like Boston. And I think Florida has the potential to maybe take a map or two off Philly, but I'm just not sure. As for Philly, I think we need to look at, are they a top tier team? Because you have to prove in this matchup and the day before, look as good as the Shock did, look as good as the NYXL did, and look as good as Vancouver did. If you can do that, I think Philly is a serious title contender. Anyway, my prediction for this matchup is going to be 3-0 Philly. I don't think Florida gets that map, though I think it could be close. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and open it up to you guys. Let me know what you think. And that's going to do it for this weekend preview. Obviously, this weekend is about half as long because there's half as many homestands. But I hope you guys enjoyed nonetheless. This will probably be the format for these weekend previews moving forward. Start with a review of last week and then finish with the preview of this week. I figured just combining it into one longer video is probably more convenient for both you guys and me, so we'll probably stick with that for now. Anyway, I want to thank you guys all so much for watching, and if you made it this far into the video, I'd really encourage you to subscribe. We're going to be doing this each week, as well as live streams here and there, which I've done a few of those so far, and you guys have really enjoyed them, and I really appreciate that. So that's going to do it for this video. I will talk to you guys later. Thank you for watching.